As an animator, illustrator, and director, Michaël Dudok de Wit combines hand-drawn animation and watercolor to create a unique use of film language. His shorts are known for their ability to convey the maximum amount of emotion, meaning, and humor in just a few animated brushstrokes. It was 20 years ago this year that Michaël Dudok de Wit's film, Father and Daughter, swept the animation world, winning some of the most prestigious animation awards, including the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. It is our pleasure to welcome Michaël Dudok de Wit to Vancouver's Spark Animation Festival. Michael. So let's begin just by telling us, how did you get into animation?
I went to art school, art college, and not knowing what I wanted to do, I knew that art college was the right choice. But within half a year, I realized I wanted to tell stories. And this is in the 70s, mid-70s, and in those days there was an explosion of comics, new comics genres. Suddenly everything was being explored in comics, like spirituality, sex, drugs, politics, etc. And then I went to my first animation festival ever in Annecy in France in 75, and then I made up my mind. I want to do animation, mainly because I need to draw, but the idea of combining music and illustration, to me, so I thought that that's the perfect marriage.
Now, most of your work combines or uses a Chinese or a Japanese type of brush stroke or brushwork. Where did you learn that? What inspired you? What were the influences in combining that, bringing that into your work?
Yes, actually, I knew very little about traditional Japanese art until about the age of 24. I saw a big exhibition in London. It was called Japan. Huge exhibition. Everybody went, and there things clicked. The traditional art, the brush paintings, and I saw art made by Zen monks and Zen priests, and they were very spontaneous and yet very mature, and they had a sense of humor, and you saw the craft. It was not polished, it was fresh. And suddenly the penny dropped. I realized that is what I want to not imitate that art. I would never be able to imitate that, but somehow look for the same that they looked for, that simplicity. And yet, there's a background behind the simplicity.
So I guess, obviously, with films like your film Tom Sweep, but especially The Monk and the Fish, that especially inspired it with a Zen monk type of calligraphy.
Yes. Actually, I would like to say a bit more about that, because I couldn't draw with a brush. I had not learned that to actually really be very, very controlled with a brush. And then suddenly on the market appeared the brush pen, which is basically a brush with ink already inside it. And we all looked at it and said, "Wow, isn't it great? It's so easy." And suddenly that shifted me. When I played around with a brush pen, I thought, "Oh, in that case, actually, I may as well use a real brush. It's even more interesting." With The Monk and the Fish, I really want to use the thick brush line on cell as a line with character, and also as a way of playing with light and shadow. Usually the line is a bit thicker on the shadow side, for instance. So I saw it as a graphics thing as well. The story was actually also inspired by the Far East, by East India, the Orient. It was based on something that I'd seen as a student called the 10 Oxfording Pictures. It's basically a series of 10 pictures with the text underneath, explaining the path to awakening from the Taoist Buddhist perspective. It's well known. It's 7 centuries old or something like that, from China originally. And it has been copied many times, including in Japan. And I saw it when I was a student, and I was bowled over by that, because intuitively I recognized something in that. It's not logical. It has to be seen on a different level. And it's basically about one character looking for another character. In this case, a young man looking for an ox. And the idea inspired me to do Monk and the Fish, which is not about funny gag at the end or about the monk eating the fish or something like that. It's more about the monk and the fish. I know it sounds a bit flat when I say it, but it's more about the union between the monk and the fish. That was the main reason to make the film.
Well, that film would go on to get nominated for an Academy Award, and I guess really eventually would set you up for the making of Father and Daughter.
Yes. The Monk and the Fish gave me confidence to continue doing animation, because I was just quite a sport in my career. I'd done many commercials. I enjoyed them. I learned a lot from them. I mean, really a lot. The thing I learned most from commercials, and especially in the beginning, was how to put myself in position of the audience. Because it's very nice to do interesting animation, but the audience has to get it, narratively and visually. And I learned from commercials that you really have to make clear what the audience should understand, and what is ambiguous. It's consciously ambiguous, not because you are a poor storyteller, but it's because you make a very distinct choice. And I somehow didn't manage to get funding for my short films. I just didn't. And then finally I did for The Monk and the Fish. And then I thought, okay, I'll stay in animation a bit longer. This is good. I found something that's genuinely me. I love entertainment, but I want to do more than entertainment. I want to give something that somehow stays with you. So after The Monk and the Fish, which to my delight, of course, won awards, I immediately started storyboarding on another story, but I got stuck in that. So I didn't. It was partly mature, but partly unfinished, and that frustrated me. So one day I simply said to myself, "Okay, slow down, hang on. What do you really want to say in your next film? What do you really, really want to express?" I basically, at the right time, asked myself the right question. And then the idea for Father and Daughter, my next film, matured within minutes. It was a really nice moment. I had a few following questions. And basically the answer to what do I want to express in Father and Daughter is very simply is the feeling of longing or yearning. Not necessarily a child longing for a parent, but the essence of longing. Because by that time, I'd been aware that I was carrying a longing in me. And it's subtle, and it's often hidden by layers of other things which are more important, but it's somehow always there. And I was intrigued by that. I thought, it's actually, you know what, it's actually always there. And although it's about something that's absent, it's suffering. At the same time, it's very beautiful because there's something very clean about it, very pure. That longing, and of course I started recognizing it in many other people, even without them knowing. And that longing, I thought, just imagine expressing that in a film. Would that be possible, etc., etc. That was the starting point of Father and Daughter.
So now, how did you develop that visually? Those are strong emotions, and we don't always think about them and even realize they're within us until something like your film comes along and taps into it. So how do you develop those emotions visually? You have the seed of the idea. Now,
how did I do that? Of course, the other question I asked myself is, what's the setting? What's the ambience? And I chose a setting I knew very well as a child, growing up in the Netherlands. The flat landscape, cycling in a landscape which is totally flat is actually quite special. And although my parents were alive and I was a father of two young children, I quickly saw that the symbolism of a young person longing for his or her parents, absent parents, would actually be a good symbol. I think it's something we can all relate to, whether our parents are there or not. And it's also very simple narratively. So that's how I conceived that. But I think the real answer to your question is I took my time. Basically, I spent many, many months on the storyboard, many months alone. I just needed to be alone and simply rearranged. I did little, postcard-sized drawings on the table. We arranged them, took one out, replaced it. The standard procedure then before computers. I'm talking about the mid-90s. And I needed to tell a long story about the whole life of one person. And at the same time, it was not supposed to be rushed and full of anecdotes and full of information. We don't know anything about her. We don't know anything about her father except that which serves the story. That's why it took a long time, because I wanted to make sure that the film would be relatively serene in terms of activity, and yet tell the story, a whole life of one person.
It's interesting because when you look at it, it's this linear journey, as you mentioned, following her life. We have the girl, her bicycle, and there's this repetitive aspect of that recurring scene of the girl and her bicycle. And that could cause us to lose interest. But in fact, it's quite engaging. We're caught up with that cycle of life and that visual rhythm that's happening. So maybe you talk further about that rhythm. How did you build that rhythm within that storyboard in pre-production?
Okay, it's a very simple trick. I had the melody in mind of the music, a famous melody from the 19th century. The composer was Serbian, Yugoslavian, I think. I'm not sure. Serbian. I think he was from Belgrade. Anyway, from that part of the world. But the same melody was taken by other artists as well and is known in North America as the anniversary song. I'd heard the melody in a film by Kusturica called When Father Was Away on Business. I'd heard it by a rock singer, so I knew the melody well. Then I explored it and I thought, the original music is beautiful because they're different chapters. And it was clear that the waltz would be perfect for a film. It's a waltz rhythm because the film has a circular element to it. The wheels, of course, the circular change of the seasons. And a waltz rhythm has a circular, obviously a circular quality, so it would fit nicely together. That particular waltz is also, like so many waltzes, is kind of nostalgic. It's happy nostalgic. And I thought that nostalgia is one version of longing which would work very well with the story. Nostalgia is longing, basically. The structure of the music and the rhythm of the music helped me a lot. I had that in mind. I at the time I didn't realize, but I was ambitious because I wanted to tell an emotional story actually without exploring the facial expressions, without using language. That's quite common, of course, in short films, but not using any tears or sad faces or anything like that. I was more interested in showing the physical expressions, the body language, and the language, the film language, and the musical language. I was hoping that would work. It could have been a total flop because, of course, we always learn in animation, show the emotion, and so on. I thought the film is showing the emotion, but not the usual way in the face.
It's interesting because that aspect of you don't have any close-ups. Everything's in near silhouette. As you mentioned, there's no facial expressions, but yes, you're achieving the emotion that's there.
Close-ups, in fact, sometimes give too much information, which sound maybe a bit strange when you want to be really perfectionist and expressive. But say, for instance, a close-up of face says much more about the face than we realize. It says something about. It even says something about your background, your education, your, of course, your age, your taste, etc. I thought the film didn't need that. And the same with the voice. A voice gives a lot of micro information, which is fine if you use it well, but they didn't need to speak anyway, so leave the voices out, even any calling or anything like that. I had examples of that before. To be frank, one of the most charismatic actors, of course, who ever existed was Charlie Chaplin. In many of his films, there's no close-ups, or if there are close-ups, it's just his eyes, in fact, because part of his face is hidden by the mustache. Basically, the setup, his physical gestures, his body language are so strong, and the timing, sense of timing, and so on. That. So I was not inventing anything. I'd seen examples, and he was one of them.
Well, it's an excellent example to follow. He's a master at it. There's the girl, there's the bicycle, but there's actually a third wind that we don't always think of, but it's very part of the film, and that is the wind. And the wind, and it's pushing and pulling the girl on her bike, but also the leaves and the grasses. Talk about that and how it helps with the animation process and telling the visual storytelling.
It's the wind, it's the birds, it's the clouds, and it's the presence of the poplar trees. The wind is very expressive always in animation. We leave it out because it's so much work to make branches move in the wind or leaves. But the elements of nature are well, I grew up with lots of nature around me, but I thought that would be such an interesting thing to explore, to give different seasons. The film didn't have to, but it really shows the years going by.
Did you change anything from the storyboard to the final film? And also, how much time did you spend in storyboarding and the pre-production film?
Gosh, to be honest, Keith, I forgot. I think about 2 years of the storyboard. The reason why I forgot is I was taking time. I was also earning a living at the same time. So I was teaching. I was doing some working on the projects of a friend to earn some money. And I was on and off father and daughter. But if I had to condense it, I probably spent about a year solid on the storyboard animatic. There was another part of your question.
Changing from the storyboard.
Yes, of course. Yes, I took a few scenes out which were redundant. But on the whole, I'm very strong. I feel very strongly about having a very attractive storyboard where I really feel excited. I don't want to leave too much up to chance. Of course, there's always an element where you add scenes or you subtract scenes or you reposition scenes. But I only took about 2 scenes out, and that's it. I think the ending, that's it. Yeah.
Now, with your films, they've been traditional animation, but this was a combination of traditional and digital. Now, let's talk about that traditional media. What was your process with your pencil and watercolors and charcoal and such?
Okay. So the animation was all hand-drawn, and the special effects too. What was new was digital coloring, which was new for me then, of course. It was a transition period between costume camera and scanning. So suddenly, since everything was going to be scanned and then manipulated in Photoshop and so on, I could use charcoal because charcoal is basically there's a lot of gray. There's no deep black, but a lot of gray. It would have made a very different film. But since I could see that Photoshop could change the intensity of the charcoal and the colors, etc., then suddenly I introduced it. Photoshop was new to me then, and I introduced that to make the film. And it was assembled in a software which was very popular then, Animo, which doesn't exist anymore. It's been bought, I think, by Canada, I'm not sure. Anyway, it was software where you use the scans and the backgrounds and you composite the whole thing together.
So was it the use of charcoal that had you or allowed you to choose that color palette? Because it's very monochromatic, your color palette.
I thought the film had to be monochromatic, and it had to be sepia because it's just beautiful color anyway. We like sepia in photography and film, but also it works with emotion. Originally, I wanted to make the whole film in greenish tints because the green is so present in the Netherlands. But the sepia works emotionally better. And everything is blackish, whitish, sepia-ish, except the main person, the woman, has a faint indigo blue color. Partly because it works very well combined with sepia and yellows and browns. And the other reason, a very simple, logical reason, is that she changes a lot throughout the film, from little girl to old lady. Her design changes a lot. And just to emphasize that we are still seeing the same person, I gave her the same colors throughout from beginning to the end of the film.
Did you animate this on ones or twos?
Combination of the two. And simply pencil on paper, which was scanned. 2B, 3B pencil on paper, which was scanned. I have to say a little detail, which I think is important. I really learned animation from Dick Purdom. Dick Purdom was an animator, well, he still is, an animator from the United States who moved to London, married Jill Thomas, who was his producer, and they set up his own studio, and I worked with them on and off for over 10 years on commercials. He is a genius animator. I'm talking a bit in past because he's retired now. An absolute genius animator. And he was one of Dick Williams' main animators, working with Dick Williams for many years in Soho Square. So I felt, although I only did one commercial at the Dick Williams studio, I was freelance, I felt I was following the Dick Williams school of animation. I don't animate like Dick Williams, of course. He was incredible. But there was a perfectionism, and there was an attention to observation, and an attention to be really expressive, which percolated all the way through Dick Purdom to me. I see myself as the Dick Williams school, although you wouldn't say that looking at my work.
Did you do it all yourself? Did you have assistants for your animation?
So usually I tend to assist myself because I don't have a formula. I experiment even now. But I had a co-animator for a while and an assistant for a while. For instance, there's one scene where you see poplar trees moving in the wind with leaves. That was a lot of work. So she worked for days and days and days on that.
When we look at computer animation today, I mean, you talked about using Animo and scanning pictures and that. What was the benefit? This is a new transition into digital, being 20 years ago. Now it's just an everyday part of our lives. But how was it a benefit to the making of this film?
If I had made it on cell, I would have had to choose a different technique. The whole feeling would have been different. Animation-wise, it would be the same. But the finishing, I didn't have the freedom to play digitally with elements. I think that would have been the difference. Later, my more recent film, The Red Turtle, there it was very different. There was actually CGI animation. That's a different subject again.
Let's talk about the ending of Father and Daughter. It's purposely left ambiguous. We have the departure of the father, and then the very poignant ending of the daughter. It's rather open-ended, and it leaves each viewer to come to their own conclusion. Why why not something more definitive?
It's tricky because a lot of spectators love an ending which really works logically or has a very nice, funny twist. And me too, of course, I love those films. Or an ending which arrives at a very, very clear, worked out conclusion. The two films we talk about, the endings are more subtle, more symbolic, more poetic. To me, I still am fascinated by the notion of death, or the belief in death. And the film is an exploration of that. No, death is very different from person to person. For some people, it's so horrific that they just don't go there. They don't talk about death until they're really confronted with it, and it's very, very, very painful. And for other people, it's something that psychologically and emotionally they have explored already, or spiritually they have explored already. I was fascinated by that on a spiritual level. So the film talks about that. It's intuitive. It felt right, but it's not rational. And to give you an example, when the film was finished, I remember one occasion at Annecy Festival, after the film was screened there, two people came to me separately, but they were at the same time, and one expressed her interest in the film, and she said, what I really like in the film is how it treats death. And the other person standing with us was saying, what do you mean? It's not at all a film about death. And that was spot on. They both seem to like the film, but they don't have to see it exactly the same way, and it may still work. So it's risky because it's ambiguous. Ambiguity is ugly when it's just confusing and messy or something, or not mature yet. Ambiguity is beautiful when you really appreciate ambiguity. And I was obviously aiming for the second kind of ambiguity. But yeah, no, there's always a risk. And both films have invited many conversations where people would indeed ask the question. They would be very, very frank and come to me and say, "Okay, tell me, what are you trying to say?" Things like that, and that's fair enough. I don't have a problem with that.
Now, you mentioned, we were talking about the beginning of the film and how you generated the idea and you took it, and for that visual rhythm, you used music. You already had a soundtrack in your mind. Let's talk about the music and soundtrack. You used Norman Roger from National Film Board of Canada.
Yes.
The music itself is very sparse, as well as the animation perfectly matches. It's this perfect marriage of an oral landscape matching the visual landscape. Let's talk about the music and the use of Norman.
So when I conceived of the story of the story of father and daughter, I also asked myself what music would be right, and so I came up with this melody which I'd heard before. I was very pleased with the idea of using that melody. The original name is the Danube Waves, the Waves of the Danube. And I'd met Norman Roger. He's from Montreal. Yeah, you said he's National Film Board of Canada. He did a lot with the National Film Board, but he is also independent. He's done maybe over 100 animated film scores. And I'd met him at Ottawa Film Festival, Animation Festival years before. And I was very pleased to meet him because first of all, he was very nice, very, very modest, very gentle. And I immediately liked him. But I wanted to tell him how much I love his music for The Man Who Planted Trees by Frédéric Bach. Which is very emotional, the music, but in a discreet way, not in a big pompous way. And that music is just so beautiful. So I told him how much I loved it. And I'd heard music from other films as well, Paul Driessen. And when I thought of Father and Daughter, I thought, wouldn't that be just amazing if Norman Roger would be the composer? Because he has that sensitivity that I appreciate. And I just phoned him. I told him, in principle, would you be open for me to send you a storyboard? I'm still working on it, but it's almost all there. Could you just look at it and say if you see something? And he replied later when he saw the storyboard, and he said he's very interested. And I asked him, so do you know the Danube Waves? And he said, do I know the Danube Waves? I used to play it when I was in the band at parties. Of course, I know the melody. And he thought it would be suitable for the film too. I asked him to do a simple version, just a starting point. At that point, I realized I didn't want to synchronize too much to the music. The music had to be nourishing, had to give an extra dimension to the film, but not synchronized exactly. So I felt comfortable animating the whole film without having the final music track as a guide. But he already did a first attempt, a first version, which gave me the confidence that it would be right. Then when all the animation was done and filmed and everything, I spent a week with him in Montreal. I stayed with him actually, and his wife Marcy Page, and he composed the music. During the day, I would go cycling around Montreal. He would compose music, and in the evening we would listen to the result. His son, Jean-Baptiste, who was at that time, gosh, I've got now probably about 22, did the sound effects. There are not that many, but there are sound effects very distinct, like bicycle bells. And so it was perfect because the father could be there as a feedback if necessary, and both of them, they would be all in the same building. They could make sure that the soundtrack and the music would be in harmony with each other.
So that's where you finished the film, was in Montreal?
Correct, yes. We finished it there. It was great. I like Montreal. It's not a pretty city, but I like the ambience. And of course, I was staying with them, and it was just, I felt so lucky. Then it was the final stages of post-production quickly sending the finished product off to Montreal, to Ottawa Festival, the deadline for the entry of films. It was funny because it was on a Saturday, and I think the closing time that was the closing day. The closing time was noon, and we arrived just like minutes before noon. It was selected by the Ottawa Festival, and it won a beautiful award.
Beautiful. Well, it was won 24 awards around the world. Now
it's done well. Yeah, it's done well.
Yeah, same. Yeah, it's done pretty well.
Yes.
Which award for you was the most satisfying?
Gosh, it's hard to say. So it won the Academy Award. That's satisfying in terms of prestige and promotion of the film. People hear about the film. That's, of course, that's beyond any other award. It's the most famous film award. So people heard about the film, advertising agency heard about it, friends heard about it, and so on. That's very satisfying, of course. But on a more subtle level, gosh, sometimes people would come to me with their eyes completely wet at a festival or an other occasion. Well, that's special. That's really special. When they are moved and they tell me that the film reflects something they have experienced in their own lives, and we don't have to go into detail. That's all. That's amazing. That really is.
Well, how did all that success of Father and Daughter affect your career?
It wasn't career changing, except that at that time, the film Father and Daughter, just before the Oscars, before the Oscar ceremony, the film, I had an agent in LA, Ron Diamond, Acme Film Works, he's well known, and an agent for commercials, to do commercials with him. And he had sent the film to some advertising agencies. The day after the film won the Academy Award, one advertising agency said, we want that. We want that look, that feel. We've got a product in mind that would be perfect. It was AT&T, and they wanted me to direct not one AT&T commercial, but half a dozen. And I remember this was literally, I got this news like 2 days after the ceremony. I was totally depleted. I was exhausted. I'd been working, and I was jet lagged, and I'd been promoting the film and so on. And I remember saying to Ron Diamond, it sounds really nice, those commercials, but I can't do them. I won't have the energy. It's too bad. And he said, Michael, you should really look at it. Look, they had you in mind, and they want you to design them and direct them. and we will get the best animators helping you, and you will do it in London. I live in London. You will do it in London. You don't have to come to the States, etc. I said, oh, yeah, I know, but I can't. I simply can't. And then Ron Diamond said, I remember he said, do you know how much you will earn with these commercials? And he gave me a number. And I said, can I have a look at those storyboards again? I changed my mind then, because that was too good to be true. I've never been rich, but when suddenly you have got a nice budget, you earn well enough then to take time off and to work on your next project. That was it was exhausting to make it. It was really exhausting, but we made AT&T commercials. Now, in the bigger answer to your question is, it didn't change my life that much. You know, it's people. I'm still in the same queue when I try to get funding for my next film, because people judge film by the film, not by the fact that my previous work had done well. Of course, they consider that, but it has to be the next project which is strong. And some people realize that making short films is actually not that bad after all, because, you know, if an uncle or a friend, they would say, so when are you going to make serious films? And they mean feature films. They see short films as early stage in your career, and you have to move on to make feature films. They don't realize, they've never been to an animation festival, they don't realize the incredible art form of short films. So when they see that I travel all around the world to ceremonies and that the film won an Academy Award and other awards, they say, yeah, actually, it's nice, you've got a nice career. So that was nice. I was validated by some people who had no idea what I was doing.
Well, there were people that knew what you were doing, and we think of those friends in Japan.
Yes.
And Ghibli, that got their attention, didn't it?
Yes, my God. Yes, my God. That was Keith. The most impossible thing happened. They saw father and daughter. They loved it. Both Miyazaki and Takahata, Isao Takahata, and also their producer Suzuki. They loved father and daughter. They made me the biggest compliment, and they told me seriously. They said, you know, it's a Japanese film. Father and daughter is a Japanese film. They don't say that easily. And they invited me to consider making a feature which they would produce. I got a letter out of the blue asking that. I'd met them before, but, you know, socially at a festival. I'd been a visitor to Studio Ghibli also in 2004 or 5, more or less. Just very friendly, very smiley. I was in a zone. I was in bliss because I loved their films, of course. And then years went by, and then from Takahata and Suzuki, I got a letter saying, "Let's make a feature." And it was shocking. It was just shocking. I mean, if you don't get letters like that. So I immediately had to ask them questions and say, hang on. Can you please elaborate? I'm not sure I understood. And they elaborated, and I said, you want me to come, you mean you have a story and you want me to come to Tokyo and so on? They said, no, you write a story. We like father and daughter a lot, but we think you could make a feature. You write a story. You won't have our animators. You will make it in Europe. We will produce it, and we will co-produce it with our partner in Paris called Wildbot, their distributor. So Wildbot became also often my contact person because we could meet very quickly. And so I said yes. I had an idea in mind, an idea which I rejected because I didn't expect to make a feature. And the idea was the theme of the Castaway on a Desert Island disc, on a desert island. A very familiar theme used by many filmmakers and writers, of course, and we know Ulysses, and we know Robinson Crusoe, and many other versions. I thought I could do something that I would feel strongly about with that theme. I didn't see the ending yet, but I thought I could do something with that. And so I sent them a synopsis of that. It was totally different than how the film would turn out eventually. But I sent them a synopsis, and they approved, and they said, "Okay, write a script now." And they, by the way, I have to mention, they always said, "It's a risky thing, this project. It's your first feature. We've never worked with a non-Japanese director, so we take it step by step. We can't promise that the feature will be made at all costs. At every stage, we see if we are ready to do the next stage." And I thought it was fair enough. I know that some people have a nervous breakdown when directing a feature. It's not something you take casually. You do casually. And so luckily at every stage we moved on to the next stage.
And the success of it and its long legs still speak for it as well. You know, I get the feeling it has the same ambiguity of father and daughter as well.
It has, expressed differently, and again it was very conscious, not only very conscious in me. I'll tell you what I mean by conscious. First of all, I feel it intuitively. I just feel it, that this would be perfect. And I look at it and I said, yes, this has to, for instance, the ending, this has to be this is it. It's perfect. This is what I want to express. Then I let it sink in, and I also ask myself a question, but why? Why is it working? Why do you like it so much? So I start also being quite logical about it. Will it work? It's very nice to like something, but will it really work in the story? That's the second thing. And the third thing is then that I discuss it with other people. In this Red Turtle, a feature film, that's big. It's not a short film. I had a co-writer, I had an editor I had long sessions with my editor, who was very, very in touch with this kind of intuition. I had, of course, my producers. I had Takahata himself. So I had lots of conversations to test the ideas which felt right, but which I couldn't explain rationally. I believe in feedback, but it's sensitive, because if you really want to test audience, which we didn't, that's tricky, because the test audience would have filled in forms and saying we didn't get it and so on, and then the producer would have said, okay, if the test audience didn't get it, we should drop the film, or we should change the ending, or whatever. So I'm totally aware that I took a risk, and the important thing is that any ambiguity, ideally, I don't know if it works like that way, but ideally, the spectator should feel that it's conscious, that it's not it was not a mistake or an accident, that the filmmakers, me included, all really knew what they were doing.
You've had a long career. You mentioned when we look back at all your films, father and daughter's giving you a lot of legs, been able to do features as well. You've done advertising, you've done animation, you've done teaching. You mentioned earlier, is it Dick Breton? That was a great inspiration for you. Who else?
Dick Purdom.
Pardon me?
It was Richard Purdom, Dick Purdom.
Oh, Dick Purdom.
And Richard Williams, of course.
Purdom, that's it. So who else and what else inspires you?
Oh, gosh. As I said, music. I was addicted to music. Less now. But Keith, I was just like so many, and definitely people of my generation, I was listening to music nonstop. So I think my creativity, I listen to really strange choice musicians make, especially in prog rock groups like, Genesis, Yes, Pink Floyd, and so on. They make very strange choices, and I listen to them, and I would ask myself, why do I like that so much? What works there? What works for me? And so on and so on. Nature was a big inspiration, not just because I love it and I want to recreate it in the films, but there's movement in creatures, all creatures, from insects to mammals to human beings, that are interesting. All of us, for instance, to give you an example, all of us have a way of stop moving, of posing. All of us, human beings, animals, frogs, can stay motionless for an hour, and so on. And that's interesting. Our motionless moments are expressive too. but they're different from person to person and from creature to creature. I found, and of course, the elegance of movement. Why is this creature elegant and that creature less elegant, and what works and so on. So nature has been a big influence in terms of films and other culture. Comic strip. I grew up with a diet of European comic strips, Franco-Belgian comic strips, which was a very, very rich culture. Very rich. I mean, there were lots and lots of artists. And now many of them have become classics. Not just Asterix, Tintin, Lucky Luke, and so on, but also the less well-known ones. So that was a big inspiration. But film-wise, the very first festival I went to in Annecy in France in '75 showed a short film called The Heron and the Crane by Yuri Norstein. I watched all films. At that time, you could still do it because there was one theater, and you just sit early in the morning and you stay until after midnight. And so I saw that film too, and it stayed with me and up to today. That's, I would say, if I have to choose one film that really, really shaped my ambition to be poetic and to somehow touch certain emotions. That is one of them, definitely. That's number one. And The Man Who Planted Trees a number of years later also. And then many, many other films. So Yuri Norstein, all his films I find amazing. And I had a great privilege to meet him 2 years ago in Russia. There's a small festival in Suzdal near Moscow, which is Russian language festival. Very few non-Russian speakers go there. I went there, he was there, he is there every year apparently. And we didn't talk much, he didn't speak English, or well, he talked through an interpreter. And somehow it was not all right to talk much, but I just wanted to acknowledge how important he had been for me, for so many like us, so many people, and including the Japanese, including Studio Ghibli. He knows Studio Ghibli, loves his work. They have exhibited his drawings and his films. So yeah, that's, and then many others, but I would like to mention that.
Well, those two giants. I mean, Frederick Bach and Yuri Norstein. Yeah.
Yes.
They're so. Yeah. Final question. We have a lot of students I'll be watching and joining us in online for the festival. What advice would you give to students that are starting out in their animation careers today?
The thing that works best for me, I mean, it's tricky to give a general advice because some advice are pearls for one person and totally uninteresting for other people. But what worked best for me and what I would recommend as many people as possible is that all the time, from the moment I was a student and up to today, and very much today too, I allowed myself to ask myself the big questions like, what do I really like? What is the aim of my creativity? What is creativity? What is originality? Do I really want to continue this? The question which can change your whole direction, and which you may want to avoid, especially like, should I continue or should I just drop everything and leave and do something else? Questions like that are not always easy to face. And to ask them, not every day, of course, but on a regular basis, question what you really want, because they guide you, even if you don't see the answer. They speak to you. If I'm, to be honest, I'm proud of the films I've made. I'm very proud. I wouldn't have made them if I would just let myself move with the flow of having fun and so on. That would have been great, and I would have maybe done totally different things. But sometimes I sat down and say, yeah, but what do you really, really, really want to do? What do you really want to do? Yeah, but I can't do it. That's not the point. What do you really want to do? That kind of question.
Yeah, because it's a lot of people just want to get a career and start, but had to have to make money, but also to create something that will stand the test of time. Yes. Your films will. You'll be a giant with your films.
Because I'll give you an example. I was earning well with doing commercials. I was learning from them. I was enjoying them. They were interesting British commercials. And I could have quite a few friends who have created their own studios, and they're doing very nicely. When you do short films, you don't earn well. Maybe Bill Clinton does, but I mean, 1 in a million earns well. When you do short films, you're dependent on subsidies, on art support from organizations, and you have to do things on the side to survive, like illustration or teaching or other more commercial work. So you have to make a conscious choice there. And if you want a really nice, wealthy lifestyle, and you can join a large studio, maybe that's your choice. I've worked with the Disney people, with several Disney people, and they were happy. This is in the 90s. This is in 92. We were working on the storyboard of Beauty and the Beast. They came to London. We were a small team. They were top Disney animators like Tom Cito, Andreas Deja, and Glenn Keane. And I was in incredible awe of them because they were so strong. We worked together on the storyboard of Beauty and the Beast. What turned out, it was rejected all later, and they started again in California. But I saw, and I met many other Disney people, and I saw that was their joy and their passion, and they were good at it, and they were at focus, and they were part of a big community. And I thought, you see, don't judge them. They have found their path. They have found whether they agree with me or not. I'll have to ask them. And the same with commercials. There are people who just love doing commercials. They don't want to tell a story. I say, I don't have ideas for story. Let me animate. Let me direct. Let me do special effects, etc., etc. So ask yourself questions, and you may turn your initial ambition of doing this. You may discover that you actually have underneath. You have another ambition that you enjoy just as much or even more.
Well, Michael, this has been tremendous talking with you. I know that there'll be a whole new audience rediscovering and discovering Father and Daughter. I look forward to doing this together with you in person someday, maybe here in Vancouver. Thank you for joining us online and being a part of the Vancouver's Spark Animation Festival. It's been tremendous talking with you and hearing the backstory. We love the film right from the beginning, and we continue to love it today. It's been a real pleasure, Michael. Thank you for joining us.